Right now, there is a celebration happening in Washington. They want you to believe that seizing Venezuelan oil is a master stroke of American strength. They want you to believe that by weaponizing the dollar and forcing a desperate regime into submission, we have reminded the world who is in charge. But if you look past the headlines, you won't see a victory. You will see a crime scene. What is being sold to you as economic statecraft is actually the systematic dismantling of the very trust that makes the United States a superpower. We aren't securing the hemisphere. We are proving to the entire global South that doing business with America is a dangerous liability. This isn't just about gas prices or crude oil. This is about the life expectancy of the American century. Every time we use our financial system as a bludgeon, we accelerate the day when the world stops taking our calls and stops holding our currency. We are trading 80 years of institutional dominance for a short-term sugar high. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the mechanics of this failure. We are going to look at the realignment happening beneath the surface, the structural damage of Trump-style volatility, and the irreversible cost of choosing coercion over leadership. I'm Hiroshi Takamura. This is a briefing on the reality of American power, not the myth. If you are ready to understand the cost of what is happening right now, hit subscribe, and let's get to work. If you listen to the noise coming out of Washington right now, you would be forgiven for thinking that the United States has just pulled off the strategic coup of the century. The narrative being peddled is loud, it is confident, and on the surface, it is incredibly seductive. We are told that order has been restored. We are told that the Western Hemisphere is once again under firm American management. The story goes like this. We have seized the leverage. We have taken the chaotic, broken variable of Venezuelan energy, and we have bent it to our will. By tightening the screws, by weaponizing the dollar, and by forcing Caracas into a corner, we have supposedly redirected the flow of vital crude oil away from our adversaries and back into American refineries. We are told that we have successfully boxed out China, checked the expansion of BRICS, and reminded the global South that the road to economic survival still runs through the United States Treasury. It is presented as a masterclass in deal-making. It is the ultimate expression of the transactional worldview. We have the power, they have the oil, and we used the former to take the latter. If you look only at the spreadsheet, at the sheer volume of barrels crossing the Caribbean, at the localized drop in gas prices, or at the frantic diplomatic signaling from Havana and Beijing, it looks like a win. It looks like the return of the unipolar moment. But we need to stop looking at the spreadsheet and start looking at the structure. Because what is being sold to you as a restoration of American dominance is actually something much more dangerous. It is an optical illusion. It is a sugar high. And if we peel back the layers of this victory, what we find is not a strategy that secures the next 50 years of American power. We find a tactic that is actively burning down the foundations of that power for a short-term payout. Let's define what is actually happening here. This isn't diplomacy. It isn't even traditional statecraft. It is extraction under duress. The United States has effectively told a sovereign nation, however distasteful its leadership may be, that its primary natural resource is no longer its own asset, but a hostage to American policy. We haven't negotiated an alliance. We haven't built a framework for mutual security. We haven't invested in the stability of the region. We have simply applied a tourniquet to their economy and promised to loosen it only if they bleed into our bucket. Now, the realist in the room might say, so what? That is how power works. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. And 40 years ago, that realist might have been right. In the 20th century, controlling the physical flow of energy was the game. If you controlled the tap, you controlled the outcome. But we are not in the 20th century. We are operating in a highly complex, networked global economy where control does not mean physical possession. It means legitimacy. It means being the central hub that everyone else wants to plug into. Real power, enduring American power, has never been about forcing people to use the dollar, or forcing people to sell us oil because they have a gun to their head. It has been about creating a system where using the dollar and trading with America is the safest, most logical, and most profitable choice for everyone involved. That is the architecture of hegemony. It is a gravitational pull, not a shakedown. What we are witnessing in Venezuela is the abandonment of gravity in favor of force. When Washington frames this intervention as economic statecraft, they are lying to themselves, and they are lying to you. Statecraft is about building durable outcomes. What we are doing is stripping the copper wiring out of the house and calling it revenue. Think about the message this sends, not just to Caracas, but to Riyadh, to Brasilia, to New Delhi, to Lagos. When the United States demonstrates that it is willing to use its financial centrality to effectively seize control of a nation's export markets, to dictate where their ships sail and who pays for their cargo, we are not projecting strength, we are projecting risk. We are telling the rest of the world that the American financial system is no longer a public utility for global trade. We are telling them it is a weapon. And the thing about weapons is that people try very hard not to be standing in front of them. This mastery we are celebrating is superficial. Yes, the oil is flowing north for now, but look closer. Are we rebuilding the institutions in Venezuela that would make that flow sustainable? No. Are we fostering a political class that aligns with American values? No. We are simply coercing a desperate regime into a temporary transaction. The moment the pressure changes, the moment a better offer appears, or the moment the pain becomes bearable, that flow stops. We haven't bought loyalty, we've rented compliance, and the rent is getting higher every single day. Furthermore, this narrative of checking China is equally hollow. Do we honestly believe that Beijing looks at this situation and feels defeated? They don't see American strength here. They see American volatility. They see a United States that is willing to break the unwritten rules of global commerce to score a domestic political point. China is not retreating. They are taking notes. They are using this spectacle to go to the rest of the global South and say, look at what Washington does to its neighbors. Look at how they treat their so-called partners. Do you really want to keep all your reserves in dollars? Do you really want your energy security dependent on their good mood? We are handing our competitors the marketing brochure for a post-American world. So, let's dismantle the illusion completely. Winning barrels is not the same as winning the future. Seizing revenue is not the same as securing leverage. What looks like control is actually a desperate attempt to force an outcome that we no longer have the diplomatic capital to achieve through leadership. We are burning our credibility to keep the gas prices down. We are trading our reputation as the architect of the global system for a few months of favorable headlines. The tragedy is that it works, until it doesn't. The surface looks calm. The oil is moving. The administration is taking its victory lap. But beneath that surface, the bedrock of American influence is cracking. We are teaching the world that the only way to be safe from the United States is to disconnect from the United States. And once you understand that, you realize that we haven't won anything. We have just begun the process of locking ourselves out of the very room we used to run. If you want to understand the scale of the damage, you have to stop listening to the press briefings in Washington and start watching the silent machinery of the global economy. You have to look at the plumbing. While American politicians are high-fiving over seized assets and forced compliance, the rest of the world is quietly, methodically rewiring the way the planet does business. This isn't happening in press conferences. It isn't happening in angry speeches at the UN General Assembly. Those are distractions. The real shift is happening in central bank ledgers, in shipping manifests, and in the complex, boring details of cross-border settlement mechanisms. What we are witnessing is a realignment beneath the surface, and it is happening not because the world hates America, but because the world no longer trusts America to be a neutral arbiter of commerce. Consider the behavior we are seeing from the so-called Global South. Economies like Brazil, India, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. For decades, these nations held dollars because it was the prudent thing to do. The dollar was the bedrock. It was the risk-free asset. If you wanted to sell oil, you sold it in dollars. If you wanted to store wealth, you bought U.S. treasuries. It wasn't a political choice. It was a matter of gravity. But look at what they are doing now. They aren't just complaining about American overreach. They are actively building infrastructure to bypass it. We are seeing a historic spike in central bank gold purchases, the physical hoarding of assets that cannot be frozen by a swift code from the U.S. Treasury. We are seeing bilateral trade agreements that bypass the dollar entirely. Rupees for oil, yuan for soy, digital currencies that settle instantly without ever touching a New York clearinghouse. Washington looks at this and calls it marginal. They dismiss BRICS as a disjointed talk shop of nations that don't even like each other. And they are right, to a point. India and China are rivals. Brazil and Russia have nothing in common culturally. But to dismiss them is to miss the point entirely. BRICS is not an ideological alliance. It is not the Warsaw Pact. It is a defensive coalition. It is an insurance policy against American volatility. When these nations see what the United States has done to Venezuela, and before that to Russia, and before that to Iran, they do not see justice being served. They see a terrifying precedent. They see that the United States is willing to weaponize the very currency that underpins the global system to achieve tactical political goals. They realize that if they fall out of favor with a specific administration in Washington, their sovereign assets can be turned off like a light switch. So when we celebrate controlling Venezuelan oil, we are sending a radioactive signal to every other commodity exporter on Earth. We are telling them that their integration with the U.S. financial system is a vulnerability, not an asset. We are effectively behaving as a forcing mechanism for our own displacement. Think about the irony here. For 20 years, China has been trying to convince the world to adopt the yuan and abandon the dollar. And for 20 years, the world said no. Why? Because the dollar was stable, open, and legally protected. But now? Now the United States is doing China's work for it. By turning the dollar into a tool of coercion, we are providing the incentives for systemic exit that Beijing never could. We are proving the Chinese thesis correct, that reliance on the West is a strategic risk. We are seeing this play out in real time in our own hemisphere. Look at Latin America. We treat the region as our backyard, assuming that geography dictates loyalty. But when Brazil or Mexico looks at the coercion of Venezuela, they don't see a strong America restoring order. They see an unpredictable hegemon. They see a reason to hedge. They see a reason to welcome Chinese investment, not because they prefer Chinese authoritarianism, but because China offers capital that doesn't come with the threat of sudden, weaponized confiscation. This is the cost of the victory we discussed earlier. Every barrel of oil we squeeze out of Venezuela using these tactics creates a corresponding fracture in the global financial architecture. We are converting our greatest asset, the ubiquity and trust in the American dollar, into a liability. We are turning the global reserve currency into a source of geopolitical anxiety. And once you break that trust, you cannot legislate it back into existence. You cannot sanction people into trusting you. The realignment is no longer theoretical. It is operational. The parallel systems are being built. The fire exits are being framed. And they are being built faster and with more urgency precisely because the United States has decided that short-term control is more important than long-term legitimacy. We are not just watching the system fragment. We are the ones swinging the hammer. We have to be very precise about where this instability is coming from. And to do that, we have to perform a difficult but necessary separation. We must distinguish between the United States of America, its interests, its people, its vast institutional capability, and the specific corrosive operating system that has infected its leadership. We need to talk about Trumpism. And I don't mean the personality. I don't mean the rallies or the rhetoric or the culture war noise that fills up the cable news cycle. None of that matters to the strategic equation. I am talking about Trumpism as a doctrine of statecraft. I am talking about the deliberate dismantling of institutional process in favor of personal whim. Because what we are seeing, this sugar rush foreign policy, this weaponization of finance, this frantic extraction of short-term wins, is the direct result of a philosophy that views the American presidency not as a stewardship of a system, but as the ownership of a brand. The fundamental asset of American power since 1945 has not been our tanks, and it has not been our GDP. It has been our predictability. For 70 years, allies and adversaries alike knew that the United States was an anchor. You might not agree with Washington. You might even fight proxy wars against Washington. But you knew that the United States operated within a certain band of rational behavior. You knew that treaties meant something. You knew that the State Department spoke for the president. You knew that we didn't wake up on a Tuesday and burn down a trade agreement just to see the sparks fly. Trumpism destroys that asset. It takes the concrete foundation of American reliability and turns it into quicksand. Under this doctrine, everything is transactional. Everything is zero-sum. There are no allies, only temporary partners who haven't been squeezed yet. There are no principles, only leverage. And the terrifying realization for the rest of the world is that under this model, the word of the United States is only good until the next news cycle. Think about what this does to the psychology of an ally. If you are Japan, or Germany, or Australia, how do you plan for the next 10 years when you can't even predict the next 10 months of American policy? You don't. You start making contingency plans. You start hedging. You start asking yourself if you need to build your own nuclear deterrent because the American nuclear umbrella might be folded up on a whim. This is not America first. This is America alone. We see this corrosion at work in the Venezuela situation. A traditional American administration would have used the leverage we have to build a regional coalition, reinforcing the Organization of American States, creating a framework that outlasts the current crisis. Trumpism bypasses the institution. It goes straight for the coercion. It treats complex geopolitical surgery like a real estate shakedown. We want the oil. We have the banks. Make the deal. It feels powerful in the moment. It scratches that itch for dominance. But it is strategically suicidal. Because by replacing institutional process with personal doctrine, we are removing the shock absorbers from the global system. When you strip away the diplomats, the experts, and the career officials who understand the nuance of these relationships, and you replace them with loyalists whose only metric is immediate disruption, you are flying blind. You are mistaking chaos for energy. And let's be clear, this volatility is expensive. It imposes a risk premium on everything the United States touches. When the world believes that American policy is driven by the ego or the political needs of one man, rather than the strategic interests of the nation, the cost of doing business with us goes up. Alliances require more maintenance. Trade deals require more guarantees. Trust creates efficiency, and we are destroying trust. We are teaching the world that the United States is no longer a stabilizer. We are a volatility generator. We are the rogue wave in the ocean. And here's the hardest truth to swallow. Even when Trumpism wins, even when a tariff threat forces a concession or a sanction forces a settlement, it is a Pyrrhic victory. It confirms to the world that we are a bully. It confirms that we are erratic. It confirms that the only way to deal with America is to brace for impact. You cannot run a global empire on impulse. You cannot maintain the reserve currency of the world if you treat the Federal Reserve and the Treasury as your personal cudgels. Trumpism is not strengthening American power. It is liquidating it. It is cashing in decades of accumulated credibility for a moment of applause. And when the applause dies down, we are going to look around and realize that while we were busy looking tough, we made ourselves irrelevant to the long-term planning of the very nations we need the most. We are becoming the variable that everyone else is trying to solve for, rather than the constant they rely on. And in the game of great power competition, once you become the risk, you cease to be the leader. So, what is the bill? What is the actual price tag for this era of performative dominance and strategic vandalism? We need to be brutally honest about what is on the table. We are not risking a bad news cycle. We are not risking a dip in the polls. We are risking the permanent forfeiture of the specific structural advantages that have made the United States the center of the world for 80 years. To understand what we are losing, you have to understand what we actually have. American power does not reside in the fact that we can bomb anyone we want. It resides in the fact that the world operates on an operating system that we wrote, we maintain, and we adjudicate. We control the currency of settlement. We control the SWIFT codes. We manage the sea lanes. We hold the patents. We set the standards. This is the exorbitant privilege. It means that when the world trades, it pays a toll to American influence. It means that we can run deficits that would bankrupt any other nation because the world has nowhere else to park its savings. This architecture is not a law of physics. It is a construct based on one thing: reliability. And right now, piece by piece, decision by decision, we are tearing that architecture down. When we use the banking system to crush Venezuela, and we do it unilaterally, without the consensus of our allies, we are telling the world that our financial infrastructure is not a public utility, but a private weapon. When we treat NATO or the alliances in the Pacific as protection rackets rather than mutual security pacts, we are telling the world that our defense commitments are for sale. When we replace long-term strategic planning with the chaotic whims of Trumpism, we are telling the world that the captain has left the bridge. Here is the danger that Washington refuses to see. These losses are cumulative, and they are nonlinear. Power is sticky. The dollar is sticky. It takes a lot to make people leave, but once they leave, once they incur the switching costs to build a new payment system or route their oil through a different pipeline or sign a defense treaty with a rival power, they do not come back. Leverage is not a boomerang. You cannot throw it away and expect it to return to your hand. If Saudi Arabia starts pricing oil in yuan, even just 20% of it, that liquidity never returns to the dollar. If Brazil builds a digital settlement layer with China to avoid U.S. sanctions, that infrastructure remains in place forever. We are watching the network effect work in reverse. For decades, the network effect made the U.S. stronger because everyone was connected to us. Now we are incentivizing the creation of a rival network, and every node that disconnects from us and connects to them makes their network stronger and ours weaker. We are creating a world where the United States is no longer the inevitable partner, but merely one option among many, and an expensive, high-risk option at that. We are narrowing the window of our own relevance. This is the tragedy of the current moment. We are trading the structural, boring, invisible power that rules the world for the loud, flashy, cinematic power that makes for good TV clips. We are trading the bank for the badge. If this trajectory continues, if we continue to mistake coercion for strength and unpredictability for strategy, we will wake up in a decade and find that the United States is still a large country and still a rich country, but we are no longer the essential country. We will be a player in the system, but we will no longer be the house. The window to correct this is still open, but it is closing faster than we think. The world is adapting. The bypass roads are being paved. The trust is evaporating. And the terrifying reality is that we are the ones pouring the concrete for the roads that lead away from us. We are choosing short-term assertion at the cost of long-term diminishment. And once the system shifts, once the gravity moves elsewhere, No amount of bluster, no amount of tariffs, and no amount of sudden diplomatic panic will be enough to bring it back.